the Disney Channel.
Wonderful world of Disney. And now, tonight's program from the wonderful world of Disney, the Footloose Goose.
That haunting, eerie call. It is the voice of the geese, and it signals the start of a new season along the Mississippi Flyway. Each spring, in the time of new beginnings, the overhead highway that traverses the North American heartland is busy with this aerial traffic, and the vast skies echo with the ancient call that beckons the wild birds to their nesting grounds. One who loved the distant voices, who watched and waited for the annual passage, was a man named Tom Rank. To him, the far-ranging Canadas were creatures of singular beauty, their venturing free spirit something to lift the heart. And it was always his hope that some would drop in and stay a while on the long journey north. In Tom Rank's eyes, all waterfowl were beautiful, but the stately Canadas especially so. They seemed to possess a dignity and grace all their own. The busy little mallards were handsome, true enough. Perky wood ducks were perhaps the gaudiest of his guests. And the silent swans almost something out of fantasy. But of them all, his favorites were the regal Canadas. In fact, he kept a pinioned flock of his own on the premises, partly for pleasure, partly as a lure for the passing wild ones. These geese couldn't fly and so couldn't join the wild migration. Still, they became good company for the traveling visitors who were just passing through. Among them this time, there appeared a big gander who particularly caught Tom Rank's eye. There was something about this fellow that was special. And in a matter of minutes, one of his own seemed to think so too. His favorite female, a goose he called Duchess, seemed more than a little interested in the passing stranger. Tom Rank knew a courtship when he saw one. Indeed, the ritual for Canadas is one of the simplest, and this pleased him very much. It was something he had been waiting for every bit as much as Duchess herself. The two seemed perfectly matched. This event of the morning was important to all concerned. Important enough to go call John Mackenna.
Hey, Mac! Mac? Hey, you got a minute?
Yeah.
Come out here. I got something I want to show you.
What's up?
Looks like Duchess finally found herself a mate.
So then what happened?
Well, I don't know.
As owner of the Silver Lake Trout Farm, John Mackenna was a sober-sided man, inclined to look at life as a business proposition, all profit and loss, and not much else.
Well, it's about time. We've got to build up the flock.
She picked herself a fine big one, huh?
Sure so.
Yeah, funny thing, though. She hitched up with one of that wild bunch that just dropped in.
Well, now, that's no good.
Why not?
It's a bad deal is why. It's a poor match.
Maybe so, maybe no, but... Well, they're stuck with each other, seeing as how Canada's always made for life.
Not this time. It won't last. It can't. Just figure it, Tom. The Duchess here is falling for a traveling man, but she can't travel, and that's her big mistake.
Oh, no, the fact that she can't fly won't matter. Not if he settles down here.
Which a wild one like that isn't likely to do. Now, when the time comes, that gander will fly off in the wild blue yonder and just leave her sitting here.
No, I got a feeling he's gonna stay.
You've got a feeling. I tell you, he isn't going to be tied down to a mate that can't migrate. Come time to go, he'll move on.
And I say he's gonna stay. And if he don't stay, I'll eat my hat.
Man, you sure got a lot of faith in a wild goose you never saw before.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. Is it a bet?
Now, what have I got to lose? If he goes, you're out of hat. If he stays, I'm in an extra goose or two. Can't turn down a deal like that. But I'm thinking you better be cooking up a good hat sauce.
Duke, old boy? I guess you're the Duke now. Don't you go deserting our Duchess. For her sake, or for mine.
Tom Rank couldn't tell whether he had made a good bet or not, but that wasn't really the point. Since Mackenna's wife had died, he had become a rather withdrawn man, and so anything to try to bring him out of his shell. Next morning, the flock of wild visitors, by now well-fed and well-rested, prepared to go their wandering way up to their nesting grounds beyond the Canadian border. An undercurrent of excitement spread through their ranks. For their kind, the ancient call to travel was not to be denied. It was time to move on. And suddenly, as if on signal, they all sprang into the air together. Departure of his fellows, Duke was anxious to be on the move, too. He knew as well as any that it was time to leave. Duchess, of course, was expected to come, too, like any good traveling companion. But such was not to be, for Duchess couldn't fly. Her destiny was here on the home pond, not in the vast skies above. And so a puzzled gander set his course, perhaps wondering why his mate wouldn't follow.
Well, there go the wild ones.
All of them?
Every single one of them. Including Duke.
Duke? Who's Duke?
It's the big gander.
You mean you already named him? Figured him to be a permanent guest? Like I tried to tell you, Duchess was a cinch to get left behind.
It isn't right. Canadas aren't meant to be loners any more than people are.
Yeah, it is too bad. Too bad about what you're gonna have for supper tonight.
You're gonna hold me to it.
Yep. Might be best if your missus makes a salad out of it. Diced real fine and doused with a good dressing.
And so it was that Tom Rank had lost a bet, and Duchess a mate. For all her plaintive calling, there was to be no answering echo from the skies above. Then it came, a wild, triumphant cry, signaling Duke's return. The wanderer was home, home at last.
Like I say, Canadas aren't meant to be loners. And I wasn't meant to eat this hat.
Once he had decided to take on domestic duties, Duke became quite the model partner, beginning his settling in with a fine display of togetherness. These two made a handsome pair indeed. It so happens that Canadas seldom leave each other, once mated. Duke and Duchess set out together to go house hunting. By choice and habit, Canadas prefer a raised nest, a sort of mounded place for isolation and protection. And so, courtesy of the management, these had been provided in any number of convenient locations. And many another had found them suitable. But for some reason, not Duke. Perhaps the fact that their being man-made bothered him. Perhaps his wild nature required something else. It soon became apparent that he and Duchess sought something special, something farther afield.
Oh, no. That wild maverick's trying to get her off the property.
Most likely headed for Lower Creek, where he figures there's better nesting.
Yeah, but that's coyote country. We can't keep an eye on Duchess down there, and those varmints will get her for sure. We gotta head her off.
And so it turned out that Duchess was not to set up housekeeping in the wild. She was too valuable for that. John Mackenna's business sense of what made for a good balance sheet wouldn't permit it. For her own good and his, Mackenna had other plans. As for Duke, he could tag along if he wished. it was Mackenna's choice that became home. A special compound with special protection, designed mainly to keep a footloose goose on the reservation. And Duke, for his part, learned to accept these arrangements out of necessity. Anything to be where Duchess was. She was his responsibility now. And soon there would be a family to protect as well. Wherever there are eggs to be found, there are apt to be egg snatchers too. And sure enough, it wasn't long before a masked burglar came over the hill, his mind set on malice and mischief. The raccoon made his rounds house to house, as it were, checking out things with the thoroughness of a professional. And all to no purpose. In every case, he came up empty-handed. Ah, now. Here was something, a nest with eggs in it, guarded by the owners, protected by a fence, probably with its own built-in burglar alarm. A neat problem, a sort of Chinese box within a box. Could he crack it? Well, it seemed a challenge to his skills, even a testing of his good sense. But he'd give it a try. Eggs were eggs wherever you found them, and you came by them as you could. A raccoon who will face a pair of angry geese is either inexperienced or foolish, or perhaps both. This one learned that soon enough. Now he was having to cope with double trouble. Free to come and go as he pleased, the big gander often foraged far from home, even as far as coyote country, the very thing Mackenna had worried about. And one day, sure enough, the mysterious and threatening coyote actually showed up. It had been a close call for the gander, but luck and alertness had kept him safe. Canada geese seem to have a sixth sense whenever danger threatens. There are times, though, when native reflex isn't enough. Now a new kind of trouble was brewing, which even he was unprepared for. It began in a deceptive way as a simple summer storm. In this part of the world, a simple thunderstorm always has the possibility of turning into something far worse. A roaring, turning, twisting tornado. This one caught Duke in the open, a most dangerous place to be, even on the fringes of a passing twister. Had risen sharply. Duke was being buffeted by turbulence such as he had never known. He was determined to get home if he could, and this was to prove his undoing. finally fought his way out of the grip of the twister, but now he was in a different predicament. He was disoriented and momentarily lost, as sometimes happens to birds caught in severe storms. Without his meaning to, he kept flying farther and farther from home. Because now instinct took over, sweeping him northward along the ancient migration route. The gander traveled over an endless wilderness. Finally, beyond the Canadian border, fatigue and sheer exhaustion began to pull him earthward. The tired traveler was once again with his own kind. Duke's long journeying had brought him to one of the Canadian sanctuaries, a place for congregating and conversation. If in his loneliness he had felt a need for company, he had found it here. Company till company wouldn't stop. What at first looked like the grand welcome somehow didn't turn out that way. One of the other ganders picked Duke for an interloper, figuring him a loner among partners. And Duke, of course, felt obliged to give back as good as he got. But enough was enough. Soon the resident bully had had it, and Duke stood ready to take on anybody else with exaggerated ambitions. He felt he could lick his weight in wildcats. Oops. Life is like that sometimes, full of surprises. And how could the bobcat know he might just be in line for one of his own? All of a sudden, there were several surprises. Some surprised biologists here to take a goose count. Some surprised geese not really wanting to be counted. A surprised gander named Duke, and a very surprised and angry bobcat whose hunting had been spoiled. What to do with this snarling bundle of fury? Well, as far as Duke was concerned, that was their problem. He was getting out of here, but quick. This was no place for him. Suddenly, Duke decided the ground wasn't the safest place to be. Better to be back in the air, where he belonged. And now a strange kind of recall began to work, a mysterious form of memory. He remembered, as it were, that his mate was somewhere in the south, back along the flight path where the tornado had struck. He was determined to find her if he could. Toward day's end, fatigue began to take its toll. he settled earthward, seeking out a lonely lake, content to call it a good journey and welcoming a night's rest. It was a placid, peaceful little lake, and from what he could see, Duke had it all to himself. Or he thought he did. The Wolverine is double danger, a dealer in death. A narrow escape, a near thing, too near, much, much too near. As it turned out, Duke had saved something and lost something. He had kept his life, lost the ability to fly. One wing was gone, definitely disabled. How was he to get home now, robbed as he was of his native skill for travel? Well, he could still swim, and swim he would for as long as he could find a stream going in the right direction. The allegiance of the Canada is strong, and Duke's determination was as powerful as ever. He would somehow reach Dutchess any way he could. Back at the trout farm, meanwhile, life went on in its own routine way. There were jobs to be done and chores to tend to, such as restocking the fishing pond with catchable, customer-sized trout.
Is that the last batch?
Yeah, that's it.
How many you order this time?
Plant 3,000 this week. 2,000 last.
Yeah. Well, that ought to hold us for a while.
Yep.
Hey, is that Dutchess over there?
Yeah.
Got a fine-looking brood. How is the hatch holding up this year?
Oh, we're coming out ahead. Except I got a mink down on that lower pond taking them a dozen at a time.
Mink, huh? Little devils.
Oh, I got some traps, Seb. I'll get him, don't worry.
Dutchess seems to be hanging on to hers okay.
She's dynamite, that one. Anytime anything comes around, she gets her hackles out.
Yeah, she's doing real well for being single-handed. I wonder, whatever did happen to old Duke?
You know, the more I think about it, the more certain I am it was that bad storm we had. You remember?
Yeah.
It wiped out farm critters. Chickens, turkeys, wild birds, anything in its path. Duke must have been one of the unlucky ones.
Yeah. Guess you're right. Yeah. Oh, by the way, Charlie Masters called. He's got a niece he's going to send down. He wants us to look after her.
Charlie coming too?
No, she'll be alone.
To fish?
Yeah. With a lesson or two, maybe. Look, I'd like for you to sort of take her in tow. Show her where the big ones hang out.
Okay.
Of course, you'll probably have to land them for her.
Put the worm on the hooks, you mean?
Might be. You know how helpless most women are when it comes to fishing.
Oh, I do, yes.
When it came to entertaining lady visitors, Tom Rank, be it said, felt much more at ease with his friend Dutchess. And ever since Duke had disappeared, he made it a point to pay her special attention.
right, Duchess. First come, first serve. You always seem to be first. Those nosy mallards keeping out of your way.
It was an easy kind of chit-chat. Tom Rank talked to her as he would an old friend. And occasionally, he found ways to do her small favors.
Oh, almost forgot. Brought you something special. Some fresh lettuce.
Duchess, for her part, seemed to sense his good intentions. And a certain gleam in her eyes said much without words. Tom Rank was a sort of traveling quartermaster commissariat for everything on this farm, including the main crop itself, the all-important trout. 3-pounders, some of these, all fed and fattened for the sole purpose of attracting the visiting sportsman. Tom Rank's Canadas were more or less window dressing, bit players kept around for atmosphere. But his affections lay in their quarter. And hardly a day passed but what he didn't wish that Duchess's fate had been happier. Far to the north, Duke found himself running out of waterways. He had made use of byways and backwaters as long as he could. Now it was time to strike out cross-country on foot. He would continue his plodding odyssey overland. There seemed no other way. For a navigator accustomed to reading landmarks from the air, it was slow going. Slow going indeed, especially when the grass was as high as the pilot. Every so often, Duke would pause to get his bearings. Which way now? This way or that way? If there's one thing a Canada never loses, no matter what, it's a sort of built-in sense of south. In time, Duke came to a highway and found the going easier. He was quite content to pound the pavement so long as it carried him south. In fact, he much preferred this mode of travel and decided he would make no detours, even to go around some suspicious-looking buildings and some official-looking humans.
I've never seen the road so deserted.
Up until now, maybe. But take another look.
A Canadian, obviously.
No question about it. And by birth.
Does he strike you as the smuggler type?
No, doesn't fit the profile. Still, you can never be too sure. Bringing anything in with you? I think his answer was no.
That's how I read it.
What gets me is why a Canada goose would be going south so early in the season.
He probably had a good reason. But why isn't he doing it the fast and easy way? By air.
Simple. It was such a nice day that he decided to walk.
Decided to walk, huh? Little did the kibitzers know. Minnesota, right state. Now to find the right lake among 10,000. If Silver Lake was Duke's destination, it was someone else's too. Charlie Masters' niece, the girl fisherman, come to try her luck with the wily trout for which the place was famous. It soon became apparent John Mackenna might have underestimated his guest, for she came not only with good credentials, but good equipment too. In fact, she seemed ready for anything, even an unexpected emergency.
Watch it!
Oh, I'm terribly sorry.
No need to apologize. That's pretty good shooting. Right?
Deadly.
Oh, it was careless of me. Mr. Mackenna? Oh, what a way to meet you.
Well, you did make quite an impression, Miss. Mrs.?
Miss Armstrong. Sarah Armstrong. My Uncle Charlie called.
Oh, sure. I've been expecting you. This is Tom Rank, my right-hand man.
Hi.
Quite an assortment of trout flies you have there. Black Nat, McGinty. How long are you going to be in these parts?
Well, it all depends on how the fishing is.
Well, then, see if we can't keep you for a spell. Because I know a place that you have to hide behind a tree to tie a fly on your line.
Why?
Keep the fish from jumping out of the water and stealing it right out of your hands. Say, why don't I show you some spots myself right now?
Okay.
Yeah, Tom here will be busy. Right?
Oh, well, if you say so.
Well, then let's have a go at it.
Good.
Keep an eye on the Dutchess, huh?
Sure thing, boss. Duchess, do you see what I see? He talks, he smiles, he even laughs out loud. I think he's beginning to set up and take notice of the things a man should notice.
As the journey progressed, Duke came to cornfields and cultivation. And he made his way through farmers' fields when he had to, keeping as much out of sight as possible. There came a moment when he was tempted to pause a while. Here was food in abundance, a veritable banquet for a hungry goose. But the noisy machinery was a bit frightening to a creature of the wild. Duke felt he couldn't trust this man-made thing. And so between that and the need to keep going, he stuck to his purpose and went on by. By now, Duke had traveled many a weary mile, but he was still undaunted, still determined to press on. He had come to a lake crossing and was glad to be swimming again. For a goose, swimming comes natural, always easier than walking. And the cool waters not only rested his tired feet, but soothed them as well. In a moment, he found himself with company, some welcome traveling companions. But wait a minute. Wait a minute. These weren't travelers. These were decoys. Duke had somehow stumbled into an ambush. Well, if he could just keep his wits about him and stay absolutely quiet, he might just work his way out of it. Best to let sleeping hunters, for the moment anyway, go right on sleeping. now for a little game of look-alikes. Now you see me, now you don't. Or do you? The hunter wasn't quite sure if what he thought he saw was what he really saw or not. Duke at last dropped all pretense and made his getaway as best he could. How far to home? Duke had no way of knowing. But he'd found a new way of going, one he had not tried before. And by this time, given the right direction, he'd try about anything. Straight, flat, and so far without danger. Good. Well, for a goose, it had been a pretty fair swan dive. A dying swan, maybe, but it had worked. Can't have everything. On with the show. Smooth sailing ahead. For as long as he could continue by water, Duke much preferred this mode of travel to any other. It was easy, swift, and comfortable. In fact, without his quite realizing it, the current was getting swifter all the time. The stream had suddenly picked up considerable speed. It seemed almost to be going downhill, faster and faster. That all was not as it should be. The grip of the current was more powerful than he figured. He took to dodging rocks and whirlpools as best he could. And at one point saved himself by a desperate half-gliding flight through the spray. The worst was behind him. Duke, the unsinkable, was still afloat, still underway, and determined as ever to get himself home. But Tom Rank couldn't know this, nor Duchess either for that matter. And one of these two had decided that further pining for him was futile.
Duchess, why don't you give up on him?
You can't wait forever, girl.
Duchess, it seemed, was not to be so lucky as John Mackenna, who had found new hope in the companionship of Sarah.
Duchess still off her feed, Tom?
Worse than ever, Sarah. Well, with these wild geese migrating, all she does is mope around and watch the sky.
Yeah, looking for a certain gander to come winging down.
She's a stubborn one. Sometimes Canada's are like that.
And so it was that nobody was prepared for what happened next. Nobody but Duchess, that is. Tom Rank had once made a bet and then forgotten it, but Duchess hadn't. Some basic instinct had sustained her all the while. And here came her mate at last.
Well, what do you know? It's Duke. It's gotta be. I wonder where he's been all this time.
Good question. But what I'm wondering is, why did he come running in? Why didn't he fly?
Looks like he's been winged.
So now you've got another goose that's grounded.
I'm afraid so.
Now they're a match. Neither one can fly, so now they can always be together. It sounds as though she's demanding an explanation. Where'd he go? What kept him? Things any wife would want to know.
Safe return at last. Duke and Duchess were together again as they had wished and nature intended. And for all concerned, it was a day to remember, a day to rejoice in, a day of homecoming.